Okay, so we're starting with child's pose. Hopefully that's good news. I'm gonna have a blanket out for the contact of my shins on the floor. So what you can do here is bring the feet closer, knees a little wider, and then go ahead and come on over. If your forehead can't contact the floor too easily, what about stacking your hands? And if that just positioned your shoulders in a way that wasn't useful, you could swap out the hands for the corner of a blanket or the end of a bolster. We're not going to stay too long, but I want you to get a sense here for the moment of how you are feeling in your body. And just take note that for many of us, when we come into child's pose, we're essentially visiting close to, if not the end of, our range of motion for knee flexion. It's passive though. You're not really striving to bend your knees. It's more like you just shift your hips back until they say no more. And of course, the knees aren't isolated from ankles or hips, but we'll make that our central point of our conversation. As you're here for a few moments, think about actively pressing your shins to the floor as though you were about to lift your hips up higher and come out of the pose. So I do that, and it's like I just get this little bounce away from the floor. And then if I turn it off, I just drop down those 2 inches that I came up. And I'm not actively trying to lift my hips up. It's more like that's the effect of pressing my shins down. It's as though I'm trying to get the tops of my feet more compact to the floor. They're not going to go anywhere because the floor is not going to yield. But if there were a trap door there and I could press it open below me, that's what I'm trying to do. And then I'll turn that off. And again, I just kind of drop down those inches that I lifted. Right, from here, if you've had your hands stacked or alongside your body, let's go ahead and reach forward. Straighten out the arms, lift the forehead those couple of inches from the floor, and then lift onto fingertips. So you're not exactly like palms flat, super anchored on the hands. You're gonna come onto fingertips and be light there. You're going to press those shins down and use that to come up to a sort of a modified all fours. My knees are wide and I'm just on fingers. My fingers are ahead of my shoulders. We're not staying long. And then go ahead and sit on back to your child's pose. We're gonna do that a couple of times. So I want you to examine here the role of your shins pressing to bring yourself up to what we'll call kind of a modified or a not quite exact all fours position. And then sitting yourself on back. Let's do 3 more, going pretty slowly, and be especially hooked into that action of pushing your shins down, because your shins can't go any further because you're on the floor on planet Earth. A couple more of these. I think what you could find is that the backs of the knees, which are those big old tendons, are the tendons of the hamstrings, that those have something to say about this. They kind of get rigid. They try to open up the back of the knee. Last one, go way mega super slow, really press those shins down. There are other things, of course, that are lifting you up. Could you instead imagine that it really is just the pressure of the shins? Oh, I've got one hip. It's really thinking this is pretty difficult. And then when you're ready and you come up, you know, close to that all fours pose, we'll go ahead here and give ourselves a more typical setup. And as you come onto your quadruped, you can bring the knees under the hips, make the shins run parallel behind you as opposed to crisscrossing or rolling the ankles in. And we'll turn the toes under. I like this because you can press gently back like you're going to flick your toes behind you, and use that to kind of encourage yourself to stay forward, shoulders over wrists. And as you secure this, we'll take that right leg and reach it straight back. Toes will press against the floor behind you. And as you have that toe pressure to the floor behind you, can you make that right leg completely straight? So at the back of that right knee, you feel as open as it'll come. You'll probably make the front of the knee a little tense and rigid to enforce that. And that's okay for what we're doing right here. And then let's do this a few times. We're going to raise that right leg up and then bring the toes to the floor. That's 1. Let's keep going. Here's 2. As we go through 10 of these, here comes number 3. I want you to get a sense that as you lift and lower your leg, that when you come off the floor, 4, that your heel bone and the back of your knee are trying to stay to the same height. Got about 5 more to do here. And as you go through that, it's not that the heel lifts first and then when the foot comes off, then you straighten the leg, but the leg is quite straight from start to finish. It sounds easier than it is to do it. Let's do about 3 more. About 10, I said, right? I didn't say exactly 10. And then here's your last one. And we'll hold this for a moment. And as your leg is up, notice if there's any little bend to the back of the knee and really press through. Maybe you've taken a class with me before where we do a very similar thing, but our foot is literally pressing into a wall. Now that will get your leg straight. So as you're here for a couple of breaths, could you truly envision that you're kicking your heel through some surface? If you're close enough in your space to do just that, might as well. All right, let's bring that right knee down to the ground and we'll extend out here, that left leg with the toes turned under. And you'll stay for a moment with that like toe tuck power on both feet, making sure that you're not sitting back here, but you stay forward so we can keep this intriguing for the core. And as you're here for that last breath, confirm for yourself that the back of the left knee is quite open, probably is in this position. And then we'll do about 10 here. 1, 2, left leg coming up and down. Very little else should be changing position. 3, 4. And as you go through this, do not assume that your leg stays equally straight for 5. That it's very likely that when you come up and down that there's a slight bend. 6. And instead of letting that slight bend come in, 7, you're going to keep the back of the knee open, like really try to keep the back of the knee sort of leading the way, back of the knee and the heel the same height. All right, that's probably about 10. And as you're on that last one where the leg is lifted, like really push out. And it's not going to the back of the knee over and over and saying, stretch, damn it. It might really be here trying to get some length through the leg. So your heel bone seeking something behind you. Again, if you're close enough to push your heel to a piece of furniture or a wall, might as well. And then let's return that knee to the ground. Let's untuck the toes, lift up onto fingertips. So it's a little less sturdy, so to speak. Bring your fingertips forward. We'll keep the knees and thighs parallel here unless you truly don't fit around your child's pose this way. And slowly press yourself back. Once you're there and you're as low as you'll go for this iteration of Garbhasana, press your shins and slowly come back up to your modified all fours. There's 1, let's do 4 more. Sitting back to this, the downwards action. You want to keep it nice and slow so the hamstrings are controlling that for you, but let's be especially intrigued by pressing the shins down when we come up. All right, 3 more. So slow on the way down though, you could really just plop, no plopping. And slow on the way up, but not slow just for the sake of being slow. Slow to really get a sense here that you are moving distinctly from some hamstring power. Last couple. And on that way down to sit towards your child's pose, are you still pressing your shins down? Like really try to give them to the floor. And that's everything from that bumpy spot just south of the knee, all the way along the shin bone to the fronts of the feet and ankles. All right, next time you're up, you're up. And then from here, just walk the hands in underneath the shoulders. So we have them ahead of us for the moment, but again, we're still gonna be on fingertips as you do this. And then still pressing those shins down, come up to kneeling. I always get tricked on this one because I'm always like, oh, that one's easy. But then I find I make all sorts of funny moves between here and there. So we're gonna try this a few times. You're just gonna be landing onto your fingers, meaning you're not really landing, but you're gonna be on your kneeling position. Shins are pressing the floor. And can you slow yourself down? I'm trying not to do this action I'm trying to stay forward with my pelvis. My excuse here is I have a pretty long torso. So as I go forward, there's a lot of weight ahead of me. And how slow, boom, can you get down to the fingertips on the floor? Hopefully you're going much slower than me. Shins pressing. And then instead of sitting back to then come up, how much can you reduce the sit back, like you're not trying to visit child's pose? Shins press. This is a really hard one for me. Pluck the fingers off of the floor and come up with very little sitting the hips back. It works out differently for your torso, for your strength. We'll try a couple more, knowing that I'll display for anybody who needs to see it kind of the least graceful version. So shins pressing, and yes, my hips will go back, but I'm really trying to minimize that. The easiest way for me to do this would be to sit pretty much down on my heels and then put my fingers to the floor. Oh, shins press though, don't let the feet, whoops, lift off the floor. That was not a bad one. All right, shins pressing, and without sitting back or minimizing how much you sit back, can you come back up to your kneeling position? Okay, one or two more. I'm gonna fall silent for a moment because I really wanna do these. Shins press. Ooh, not bad. Shins press on the way up. All right, one more, shins pressing. Shins pressing, that's the headline news. Try not to find a child's pose on the way up or down. If you had really long, powerful legs and a short little torso, this would be easier for you. Ugh. If that's not you, this is not me. Just make do. Trying not to get into a child's pose. Or are. All right, and then back up to kneeling. All right, so once you find yourself on your kneeling position, give yourself a couple of breaths. And again, we're gonna keep up with this idea, like the shins are really trying to stamp into the floor. And as you have that, you're going to weight shift. Maybe I'll face this away for the moment. You're going to weight shift over onto your right leg. That shin presses down, that knee presses down, and you're going to, in as few movements as possible, step into a lunge. Don't get too comfortable, because then you're going to take that foot back to the kneeling position and then weight shift over to the left. Press knee, press shin, press the top of your foot and ankle, and then to visit to a lunge. Keep pressing down on this left side. Pluck that right foot off, and we're going to swap a couple more times. So there's a weight shift, that's just logical. And as you shift your weight over, it's not like you just let the hip come out and then you take this leg forward. Instead, you think about pressing the side of the hip down, the knee down, and oh, that shin, that foot, so that you come in and out, weight shift, in and out. Let's do a couple more. Really give a highlight in your brain to the action of that foot and shin behind you, really, really pressing down. It's easy to do once I nail this foot coming forward. It's like, yes, here I am. But I really want to find it as I pluck this foot up, that I'm still pressing down behind me. Right. The next time you've completed the left side, that's the side for me. We'll come back to kneeling. I'm going to spin to the side again. So from here, get a sense if when you're kneeling, if the tension on your hip flexors, your iliacus, your psoas, rectus femoris is so influential that when you bend your knee, which is happening currently, your knee is bent, both knees are bent, that tips your pelvis forward. So here would be a big exaggeration of that. It's actually not such an exaggeration for my body. I'm quite comfortable standing like that. And then you're going to get those shins and feet to press down and come into a neutral pelvis, neutral rib cage as best as you can. My arms are up just so that you can see more clearly. The sunbeams are beginning to stream in. I might close the curtain because I think that's going to distort the image. But you've got your most excellent kneeling Tadasana. A little better. All right, and as you have your kneeling Tadasana, you can have your arms wherever it's useful to you. We're going to, from here, work on bending this left knee more. Or let me say that again. We're gonna work on bending the right knee more. So that means you're gonna be lifting the foot off of the floor. Let's do a couple more of those. I'm gonna hop off screen again. The lighting's very tricky in the morning here because the sun comes up and sometimes it like bleaches out the image and then I need to turn the lights on. Got to be my own camera crew, my own recording studio. So we're on that right side, neutral pelvis, neutral rib cage. Oh, and you're doing hamstring curls. Now what I'm going to do is keep my hands on pelvis and ribs because that's going to help me feel a little bit more organized. Whoa, couple more. I wasn't counting. Let's say that this is number 10 and hold. Now, as you're here, can you press the left shin down and lift the right shin up? Oh, go ahead and come on down. Let's do the other side. An undetermined amount of these on the left side. And so I'm turning around just to keep my working side on camera, but I know that in that little shuffle that I just did, I ended up here again on pelvis and rib cage. My pelvis is tilting forward. My ribs are slightly ahead. So what I'm going to work on here is pelvis down, ribs back. And that puts me to neutral. And even though that might not be your habit when you're in Tadasana, when you're standing on your feet, maybe your hip flexors are so tasked by having your knee bent that they tip your pelvis forward. And in fact, I would assume that unless you know for certain otherwise. So it's tail under, ribs back to get to neutral for most of us here. And then here it is on that left side. So you're going to lift the left foot off the floor. Immediately my pelvis goes forward. So I'm going to try to keep my tail under and foot off the floor. And what I find is I can't get my foot up as high because I'm bending my knee more, trying to keep my pelvis neutral. Can't claim to have been 100% successful at that. Oh, the more accurate I am at the pelvis, the less I can lift that foot. All right. I'm getting quite fatigued on that hamstring. Next one, you're up, you're gonna stay up. Oh, tail under, ribs back, foot up. Tail under, ribs back, foot up. Other shin, right shin presses down. All right, and then go ahead and come on down. Let's come into a downward dog. Just if you no other reason, I need a little relief from those hamstring contractions. So toes turn under, legs lift. And this downward dog doesn't have to be your blue ribbon. Just give yourself a moment to lengthen the backs of the knees, whether that's through motion, like you're pedaling your feet up and down, or you hold something more static. You're just stretching out those legs. But don't you know, we're not done with those. So we're gonna come back down to our hands and knees. We're gonna come back up to kneeling. And I'm going to invite you, suggest to you that you use a couple of blocks here as we come into a lunge. So your right foot will be forward. Left knee will be back, left knee will be on the ground. And you can find some space here that makes it like a decent lunge for you. But if you're mobile, you're pretty flexible, you don't have to go to max capacity. I might actually suggest that you rein it in a little bit. So this is a low lunge. And the part of me that loves mobility and flexibility is dying to slide my leg further back, but it's not going to serve me here. And as you have your hands on the blocks, you've got your right foot forward, left leg back, left knee on the ground. I'm going to push, I'm going to move the block out for a second, push this right heel down. And I actually want you to lift the ball of your right foot. So for a moment, it's like you're in a reverse heeled shoe. The ball of your right foot is off the floor, your heel is down. And as you have that push, I tell you, into the floor, like you're stamping all the way through the ground. And as you have this, imagine pushing down, which is, you don't have to imagine it, you're actually doing it. And then try to draw that heel back slightly. So I can't take it very far. I'm going to show you, here it is, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm pulling back, but it doesn't go very far. It's like I'm just sliding my heel bone within the flesh of my heel. So I'm going to keep it in that slightly pulled back position. I'm going to return my block to the side. So nothing to see here, but I still have my toes lifted and I'm still pressing down and drawing back. And as I press down, draw back, Then I'm going to move my hips back. And I may not, I'm going to show you again, move my block out of the way, get this leg totally straight because I'm still trying to pull it in, right? So this would be like runner's lunge. We've done maybe a gajillion of those as yogis. So this knee's going to be a little bit bent. I'm still pushing straight down into the floor. And I'm also imagining that I'm going to hike this back suddenly. So it's like not a runner's lunge, or it's a runner's lunge and the runner has the tightest hamstring in the world. All right, and then let's come forward and you can put the ball of the foot back down. So something more typical here. All right, let's swap this out to the other side, but let's be slow about it because you could always just do like the wag of the hips and the shuffle and kind of like visit a child's pose for a minute. But what you're gonna do is take your hands off the blocks, push this foot down, you're going to anyway, push it forward so you can come up. And then from here, oh, that leg is so far out ahead of me, but can I press my left shin down furiously and pluck this right foot off the floor and bring it back to a kneeling. And then from this kneeling position, left foot gets its day to go ahead of you. So you're gonna take it up, reach it forward, and we're just gonna come into that lunge so you don't have to fuss with anything else for the moment. And again, if you could go deeper, stay shallower, try not to go as deep. You might get a little bit more power out of this. Okay, we'll stay. And we're gonna think here about when we come into the pose, that we're going to push down through this left heel bone. And then on purpose, I want you to lift the ball of the foot up off the floor as much as you can. You might get fatigued. If you want to feel tibialis anterior, it's just to the outside of that shin bone. It should be rock hard right now because it's working very diligently to pick your foot up off the floor. And not only am I going to stamp straight down, maybe I'll take my hand to the inside to show better. I'm also going to think about pulling back again. So just a little click into position where I'm using my leg to hold that leg in instead of just doing like deep, deep lunging. As I have this, I'm not trying to move out of the lunge. That comes in a second. I actually want to feel like I'm down as low as I'm going to commit to. And then as I push that heel down and pull it back, from here, I'm going to go into, maybe we'll just kind of call it like not a runner's lunge. I'm basically trying to get this hamstring to do many things at once, right? So it's bending my knee, it's pulling my leg back, even though it's not going very far. But at the same time, I'm moving my pelvis back in such a manner that I'm actually trying to open the back of my knee. So I'm putting that hamstring under a lot of tension, a lot of contraction. And the easier thing for anybody who's somewhere supple here would be like, oh, well, I can just straighten the leg and move the hips slightly back, but you're putting a lot of action into this, right? So though sometimes sounds like I'm describing a position, I'm really describing a bunch of actions. All right. You're pressing down, pushing that heel bone, toes are off the floor, and I'm actively pulling back that foot. At the same time, I'm trying to sit back, but I don't want the hips going back to override the heels pull back. All right, and then we'll come back down to where we started, which is a more typical lunge. And we're gonna again swap sides, but purposefully. So take yourself off of the blocks, push your hips back. So it's like you're kneeling on one leg, the right leg, and press that right shin down. And can you be here without a back bend? Right shin presses down. Then we're gonna pick up this left foot from the floor and call it fairly swiftly back into kneeling. Boom. All right, and then right foot forward one more time. Okay, right foot comes forward, go down to your lunge, go to your lunge with hands on tall blocks. Even if you could slide your back leg out 10 feet further and do the splits, you're not going to. But I do want you to get a position on that back leg, and I might give my knee here just simply a little bit more blanket. I want you to get to a position where having pressure on it is not bothersome. So if you need to slide forward, slide back, flip your blanket up, add in something else, you should do so, because we're going to go back to those hamstring curls. So in this moment, I want you to actively press your shin to the floor. It's like, oh, I want, it's almost like that action, like you almost want the knee to lift, but you're not going to. So shin presses down. I love that in this. I love that in lunges because it makes me feel like I'm actually doing something, whereas usually it's like I'm just sort of like ho hum, waiting for some stretch to arrive that never seems to. So as I press my shin down, it's like, oh, that's the stuff I'm using. So hang on to that for a moment, catch up with that, and know that it's going to disappear in just a second. All right, so you can lighten off the downwards press of the shin, and here we go. Bend your knee. Here is 10, and see how close you can get the heel to your backside, and then down. Press for a moment. 9, heel comes in, release, press. 8, a little tap and press. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and make sure you're pressing the foot when it comes down for just a moment. And then here's the last one, and hold. Okay, take a breath and see how much closer you can get that heel in. And hold it in its tightest knee bend for the moment. All right, let's go ahead and lower on down. Lift your hands, move yourself up so you're kneeling on this one left knee. Call that right knee in so that you can do a kneeling on both sides, and then we'll do side 2. So left foot forward, get yourself to that lunge. And again, the idea here is that you can bend the knee while it's behind you. And if that means you have to reposition or reprop, please don't hesitate. It's going to make a world of difference. Start as you're in the pose by actively pressing the right foot and shin down to the floor. It's almost like you're trying to lift the knee off the ground, though don't. Okay, this is the last thing we'll be doing here for our short and sweet. So as you have this, press that right foot, but then here we go. 10, bring it in, and then tap it down. 9, bring it in, and then press it down. 8, and as you go through this, try to keep your pelvis in one position. 7, meaning you're not moving the hips forward and back. 6, you're staying in the pose. 5, from start to finish. 4, and press. 3, and press. 2, and then press. 1. I'm going to do a bonus one because I skipped one while I was talking. So it's not really a bonus. And 1. And then we're going to come in and you're going to stay in. Now inhale, exhale. And don't move your hips back. Don't leave your lunge. But how much closer can you take that heel towards your backside? It's not your backside towards your heel. Stay in your lunge. And bend your knee. All right, let's go ahead and let that come on down. Lift your hands off your blocks, come back, scoop this knee in, and maybe just to cap off the sequence, a downward facing dog. Again, if for nothing else, just to straighten the knees and to stretch out from the backs of the legs. All right, hope that felt good.